Hello and welcome. I'm Jeremy Rivera with CopyPress. I'm here with Dave Snyder, CEO of CopyPress, Jon Henshaw with Vimeo, and his own awesome, is it a newsletter service or what are you calling Coywolf these days? Is it?
Oh, Coywolf, so Coywolf is a hybrid wolf and coyote, and I like it because it adapts really well. It's not about coy. It's
So you're
literally stands for
so you're
coyote.
doing weird biology experiments? Is that what this
I,
is
I
about?
I didn't. Nature did. It exists, and it's an actual animal. And I like it because it just can adapt in any environment. So I kind of apply that to the digital world. And what it is, as far as a company, is it's my playground. It's my digital playground where I do stuff. Right now, I'm making an app. I write a lot. I like to test and experiment, but I'm making zero money off of it. So that's what it is.
But
Actually, it's my money sink. It's where I
it's
burn
your
my
boat.
money on a daily basis.
Yeah,
It's your
you
digital boat.
before we started, you called your neighbors nerds, like music producers, and you're sinking money into a blog about technology and marketing thoughts.
Oh, I know. What an idiot.
That's your hobby.
Right. We're all in the right place
We also have
together.
the Mark Traphagen with SEOClarity, one of the earliest writers that I can remember, aside from the wonderful Bill Slotsky, rest in peace, who's talked about authorship and that concept deeply. So let's just spitball and throw out there. Uh, Mark, why don't you give us a quick historical note about the concept of authorship and how we think maybe Google might have been using it, and then we can upgrade through the years and see where we think it is now.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Try to be as succinct as possible. I'm glad you mentioned Bill Slotsky because we stand on his shoulders for a lot of things, but this is certainly one of them. For anyone who doesn't know, and if you don't, you should go back and look up Bill's work. Bill Slotsky, Slawski, just so worthy. But he specialized in analyzing Google patents. And he was kind of our informant in that world. He had some experience, background in patent law, and he was able to look at these patents, understand them, and tell us what they might be saying about what Google's up to for the future. Always had to emphasize might, and he was careful to do that because just taking out a patent on something to protect intellectual property doesn't mean you're going to use it. And that was the controversial thing around the thing. It started this whole thing, which was something called agent rank, patent that I'm scrolling my notes here. The old memory. Today's my birthday, as the guys pointed out before we went on the recording, and my brain cells are a full year older. But early 2000s anyway. Oh, there's my outline. Okay, so yeah, sometime early 2000s, they came up with the agent rank patent, which was basically a patent to say, like, this would be a method by which a machine can understand that this is an author, this author is a particular entity, a particular person out there, and that they are connected with these pieces of content. It was pretty much that simple. Didn't go into like a patent wouldn't. They didn't go into like what would they use that for, but it spawned this whole thing of thinking, well, could this be a ranking factor that Google would want to use? Would they want to be able to assess who wrote what? Who are those people that wrote it? Should that be a ranking factor? But what touched off the match for it, and how I got involved in it was sideways, because I was, God forbid, I was a Google Plus expert. That's how I made my name in the early days, and I lived to tell about it. But
You
yeah,
are
when
still a Google Plus expert to me.
yeah, I'm still a Google Plus expert. So if you need any Google Plus work done, just you can look me up later. Just a little commercial announcement. But yeah, I dove into it because I got in on the second day of it, and there was immediately, of course, because it was a Google social network, there was rampant speculation in the SEO community that it was going to be involved with ranking somehow. That being involved in Google Plus would affect SEO in some way. That Google would connect it. But those pieces got put together when Google started around 2011, the rel equals authorship project, which was putting out a piece of structured data that they were going to use. It was already existing, but saying we're gonna make some use of this, that you can use this code to connect anything you've written on the web to your Google Plus profile. So you have a profile that Google knows this is you, and then we're going to give you a way of connecting everything you've written on the web to that. And at first it was just kind of an academic exercise. They said, this is something you can do. They didn't say what they're going to do with it. But by the next year, they began to introduce authorship results in search results. So some of you who've been around long enough might remember for a few years in different forms, you would see sometimes in your search results, you'd see my picture, John's picture, next to something that we've written, a little thumbnail photo of us in our name, kind of verifying that we know the author of this. And they were doing that through Google+. So that's when it all took off. And there was rampant explanation or speculation then that agent rank or author rank was a thing. They're ranking that, even though a number of Google spokespeople at the time vociferously denied it, that it was being used for that purpose. Where we did see it, the only effect that we could really detect, according as far as I'm concerned, was in it connected to their experiment with personalized results. Around that same time, Google was turning up, experimenting with highly personalized search results. And a lot of that was connected to Google+. So authors that you were connected to on Google+, their content would come up in your personalized search results. They would rank for you, but they weren't necessarily ranking for everybody in the world. And you might even remember from a period of time, like you could turn that on and off. There was a little toggle switch. You could do like global results or personalized results, and they would be sometimes very different. So Google shuttered, I think it was 2014, the authorship project. Those results have disappeared. They said we're no longer using rel equals author directly, although for a while they would say at conferences like, you should still use it, still put it in there, but we're not doing anything with it right now, but we might in the future. And so ever since then, the speculation has been it failed. What I've always felt like why rel equals author failed was because it was something that depending on webmasters to do or authors to do, and only a tiny minority were ever going to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think it goes farther too, right? Because
yeah, go ahead.
rel, like the no follow directive, there was, I mean, they put enough FUD behind that messaging with the rel no follow that it became a universal thing. There was not the same like this has to happen. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, hey, this is a nice thing to do. And that, I think that's why it just never got the uptick.
Yeah. And it appealed to the, the geeks and nerds in us and SEO nerds like that who wanted to, see our pictures appear in search and play around with it like that. But it never caught on in the general publishing world. It wasn't going to be adopted. So the speculation since then, on my part and others, has been that Google said, if they're going to do anything with authors, it's going to have to be at a machine learning level, because that's the only thing that will scale. So how can we, I think their attention has been turned, if they're doing anything with this, the attention has been turned to how do we know that, and we know the whole entities project, the knowledge panel, knowledge graph. They've been invested in this for years.
The vector 2019, the vector author patent.
Right. Yeah. The next iteration of that, right? Saying, so we have this way, we don't need you to code anything anymore. Like we have ways of knowing who you are, if you're an identifiable author, and we can, with a reasonable certainty, connect you with your content. So my attention has turned not so much to the method that they might be using or they're using. I think they are always playing with that. It's the question of that is real interest is are they using that in any way? Is it a thing? The Google spokespeople that we have, the John Mueller's, the Gary Eish's, have said pretty consistently, it's not a ranking factor. But I always hear that in a certain way. I said, like, they're using careful language there. There's, I think, ranking factors, I think in their world, and maybe you guys disagree with this, I don't know, but are things that they would say like explicitly and directly affect the algorithm in ways like that. But there can be, to me, a whole host of things that factor into those factors that are aspects of how do we determine that this is trustworthy content, that this is the best content for this query, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, that feeds into, expertise. They added an E, experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a system that can connect or start to identify and connect the knowledge graph of this entity and this particular content, then what do they mean expertise? Is it that you wrote a word in a way that says, oh, I really know this? Or is there really a foundational connection of authorship and this idea of this particular person wrote this and this and this, showing their expertise and their experience in it? Either one of those E's or authority, like all three of those imply that Google has reached some sort of capability that it's confident in to start applying those concepts, not necessarily as direct ranking factors, because that's how they double speak. They're like, no, having an author there doesn't necessarily change it one rank or two, but if in general, we know that the brakes can get put on due to the helpful content update, and things being really low quality. It starts to connect those pictures, especially when you can see a knowledge panel result. Like if you search for Mark Traphagen, I think if you search Jon Henshaw, you're a journalist now?
Well, that's what they say. That's what Google says.
And I was getting it. I'm not recently. I was getting it from early 2023 until like a month or two ago, and it just disappeared. But the search results for me have altered ever since. Like they have a lot more of my former publications, my former writings. So I think it's as volatile as any search feature, right? What that happened, because I never did. It used to be a few years ago. It was known that to become an entity, a human entity, a person entity in Google's knowledge graph, that there were certain databases you needed to be in. And I just never did the work to get into all of those. And so I didn't have a knowledge panel. And all of a sudden this year I got one without doing any of that work. What that tells me is, and that knowledge panel was connected to my content. That's how they showed it. They showed like, here's where he writes. That was the display of it. So that tells me is like, they've gone beyond that now. They don't need those databases anymore. They don't, they probably use them, but they don't need them exclusively. They've gotten much more sophisticated in being able to say like, we have enough connections. We have enough confidence that Mark Traphagen writes for Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, and whatnot. So I think the thing that's interesting to me is they have the data. I don't doubt that at all anymore. For anybody who's a regular author on the internet who actually exists, I think they have the data. The question is like, what are they doing with it, if anything?
Yeah, I mean,
they're definitely interested in it.
I think so. I'm going to be the dumb one on this Zoom, and I think it's great.
I haven't started talking a whole lot yet, so
right, so say something dumber than when I'm done. So like, I've always the analogy I've always made is Google makes the best chocolate chip cookie, right? By a lot, right? In America, we think we have the option of Bing and whatnot. You get outside the US, it's Google for search. I mean, Japan has Yahoo still, I think, right? Like they love Yahoo, but if I make the best chocolate chip cookie and people are buying them, why the hell am I going to change my recipe for the chocolate chip cookie, right? So like Google being a public company, every decision has to be backed by revenue. And so it's like, what inherent monetary value is to them to figure out the authorship to date? Better search, that's subjective. I think the thing that's going to change this now is AI, because like there's obvious ways to detect AI, but Google having results inundated with dog shit content again, right? Like, going back to 2010 pre-Panda will have an effect on their bottom line. Now, I think they're always, I'm not a Google fan, but they're smart about not rolling out stuff that's going to have an inherent effect on their business just because they think. Like everybody was giving them so much crap for not rolling out the generative AI stuff as quick as Bing. And I think it was the best thing ever, because it was like a total flash in the pan gimmick that is a dog shit feature overall, right? So it's like, cool. I mean, but I really think there's a play. And so my hypothesis right now, Mark, and where I'm interested is schema, right? The fact that like a huge portion of the web now has JSON LD layers, that most people have structured data. And there's pieces in that data where not only can you say who the author is, right? Which as a spammer, I would destroy that all day if they were using just the author name to do that. But there's the author URL in that schema. right? So you'd be able to generalize and say this author. So if you were an author and you tied everything you ever do back to a singular URL, right? Like, what do they call, like, Linktree kind of thing?
Yeah.
I'm old. So like, I just know that because OnlyFans girls have it all the time. I mean,
I'll just jump in and say, in the spring of this year, Jon Mueller said on Twitter, you should be doing that.
yeah, I mean,
You
because
should be
that to
linking
me, if I'm
all your
looking for
authored content to one
the
place.
easiest route for me as Google,
Mhm.
here's what I know how to do. I know how to classify stuff. I'm already bringing in all the schema, using it everywhere. And I know how to value links and link graphs and webs, right? So it just seems like it's like you're not re-engineering anything there. And if I was on the team and I was like, how are we going to battle AI? That's the first place I'm hitting. Because now I've got, all right, how do I make sure these are real people that are writing real content? Now, there's obviously going to be people like me who will still figure out how to game that, right? But at scale, that is still hard. Like, to come up with real authorship, because you're not talking about writing on a bunch of PBNs.
Mhm.
Writing real authorship where you're linking from a singular location and they're actually vetted and verified high quality publications. That's tough to scale on the spam side.
I want a chance to unpack all this.
Yeah, please.
Do it.
Because I feel like we've just like gone across all the way into AI, into how do I scale and spam. And I want to unpack, pull back a little bit. The first thing I want to talk about is eat, which all I'm going to say with that is that's a human factor. That is something that has been set up that is both for their quality raters, but it can also impact regular people, and that could impact rankings. I'll get to that in a second. The thing that I think has the most impact, or things, one is I do think they use machine learning to understand a person's writing style. Particularly, the more data they get from the actual human who's written that stuff, they can be like, yeah, I'm pretty certain this is the same person. So I think that's a piece.
I mean, it's gonna be tied into Bard now, right? Like, because you can ask those
Let's
questions.
not go to AI yet.
All right, stay with machine learning, and then we move our way. Okay, continue then.
Yeah. Although technically AI, machine learning.
Yeah.
So the other thing that was brought up, which to me is extremely important, and it was brought up, I think, by everybody, is the idea around schema and entities. And to me, I wrap all that stuff up into the term disambiguation. So the general goal and way that you get anything to rank on Google is to disambiguate it enough so that Google is confident that out of the billion pages it could return for a particular query, it's super confident that this is probably the most accurate and fits the intent, whatever it might be. And so bringing that back into the topic of authorship, it comes down to consistent linking, which is, Dave, what you were just talking about, and that's something I practice. Every single thing I put out there on every domain, at least that I can control, I link to the same author page that exists on one domain. That is why I'm a journalist to Google, because of the way that's part of why that is. The other thing is schema structured data, which is I am, we'll just say, religious about how I do that, and making sure that I also include a nice list of same as links that are associated with that author type. And so, but I'm very particular about what those same as links are. They have to be something that would be similar to, sort of, Mark, what you were talking about before, where I too, Mark, I don't have a Wikipedia entry. I haven't done any of that crap. But I have something on Crunchbase. I have something on Muckrack. I have, like, there's certain things that I have done that, if I'm good at interlinking back and forth so that it creates this tight web, per se, of like all these all link to each other, and all of those ultimately link to that main author page, then that disambiguates for Google. It more so tells them that this is all the same person, and all the content where I see this JSON LD, how I do it, and all these different things is related to this person. And then there's more things to it, but I think the simplest version of it is consistently linking to one thing, and then connecting all those together, and then writing. And then the last thing I'll say, which will just really probably open up the floodgates here, which is on AI, is it's not, to me, it is about, does the content create engagement for the searcher? And by engagement, what I mean is, how long do they stay on that content before they bounce back? If they bounce, that's engagement. If somebody searches something, they click on the link from Google, and if they're on that piece of content for a minute or more, what I have seen is that content is likely to rank even without any backlinks to it. And so take all the things I said on top of the fact that you have high engagement. That is a formula for them understanding the person and for that content performing really well.
Yeah. And do you think, John, those signals
I have a quote from Mueller. So John Mueller in a hangout on April 26, 2021 said, quote, link to a common or a kind of like central place where you say like everything comes together for this author, which could be something like a social network profile. Use that across different author pages that when you have when you're writing. So when our system looks at an article and they see an author page associated with that, they can recognize this as the same author as the person who wrote something else. And we kind of group this by entity.
I did want to say something about AI though, as it relates to all that stuff, which I forgot, which was, I suppose you could train something to write in a unique style. I suppose that author that supposedly writes that is not real. I suppose you could scale that. That just sounds
it's a crazy.
It sounds difficult.
It
sounds like it may not work, and
you'd have to fine tune your own model, right? You'd have to fine tune your own model. You'd have to go through and then do an amazing amount of digital PR to start getting the content from that model.
Person's like a real person, a real author.
You're also going to have to do, because like what we're moving into around this is something we're calling authority builder, where, all right, how do you create content that AI can never create? You get experts involved, you do interviews, you do quotes, context, like real human interaction. That's AI will never be able to do that, right? So that's the kind of content that needs to be created ongoing. But yeah, I think
younger me would have loved that, by the way. Current me absolutely hates it. I am the ultimate Luddite when it comes to this stuff, and I am a 100% fan of generative human intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, what's funny with the models, right? Like they might kill themselves at some point, and that's my favorite graph to look at, is like this idea that LLMs become so profound on the web, they just eat themselves and die. Right. But it's like what I can tell you is, here's where it will not work, because I've been testing it. You cannot scale AI content. Like when I mean scale, like we've done projects, 20,000 articles for a customer. The AI at some point in that 20,000, you fine tune a model, you don't fine tune a model, it's going to start giving you wild stuff in the mix. Yeah. Right. So like, I think, and the stuff I'm seeing is so bad online that I think we're just looking at pandas kind of tools being able to pick up most of this stuff long term and get it out of the index. But I think there will be smart people that come through and like figure out how to game the system, make the content a little better. And if I was Google, I'd be like, all right, cool, we have an easy way to figure out. The other issue here is AI, we haven't talked about this, just the issue we have today with misinformation online, like, and all of that. So again, an inherent reason for Google to figure out, all right, who the hell is this person saying this stuff, right? Again, I try to find the monetary reasons why a big company that does not give a damn about morality would actually make a change. You know what I mean?
I think the big answer has been the same as it's always been for me, and that is why do they have search engineers? Why do they keep doing algorithm updates? Why do they do all of that? What's the monetary bottom line of that? Is if the results go to crap, people stop using Google and they don't make money. So they've got an incentive to have a quality product, and the quality product is still largely dependent on us, the content producers out there, and that they have to find, the stuff that people are going to, as Jon said, they want stuff that people are going to engage with, that they're going to show interest in. They feel like, oh, Google gave me what I want. I'm going to come back again. I'm going to see more ads. So I think that's, at a very fundamental level, that's the incentive to do this kind of engineering. It's always been a question, and I think it's a great question to bring up, Dave, because I think it's always been a question for me of like value. Like, just because I've always been rejected the notion, there's a lot of SEOs that feel like if Google can do it, they do it, right? No, it doesn't make any sense. Like, that's why they're testing all the time, right? So we can talk about theoretically what they can do. It doesn't matter of like how much do they apply it. So my thought on this is that if they are doing this anywhere right now, with really concentrating on evaluating authors and that sort of thing, it's in the YMYL area. It makes the most sense there, right? It makes economic sense, because that's where you mess with somebody's health or money, you give them a wrong answer on that, they're really going to hate you. So, I think there's a cost benefit analysis there. I think that's why it's never been a major, they've never been called it a ranking factor, but they've realized like there's certain content that's of a certain value that they need to have a better assessment that it's being written by real experts.
Finance, legal, right? Like there's that whole groupage where you have real human liability involved, right?
And reviews. John Mueller posted on the 17th. He said, PSA, making up fake people for your review site is awkward, even with fake LinkedIn profiles. Copying YT reviews from others together to make your own is cheap. Submitting it as a ranking question to the office hours, what do you want us to say? So I think Jon mentioned before the call, let's talk about reviews at some point, because that ties in too about, oh, can we detect, are these real people? Is this, how does that tie in? So what were you thinking in that vein? Because I think it ties in nicely to this little fork.
Yeah, I did want to add on just to what was being talked about before I get to that I think that Google's taking the stance of AI content, it's okay, as long as it's, their high quality thing.
As long as we can't tell it's AI content, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like, sure, if we can't tell, it's not. And the thing I wanted to bring up was there's that recent research that somebody did, where they did sort of like equal human content and equal AI content around made up topics. And they showed that over time that the AI stuff finally went down, and that the human content performed better. It's anecdotal, because it's just one person doing a thing. But
before you move on to the next thing, real quick, like also you got to separate content. Not all content's the same. So like e-commerce descriptions, a lot of people have never been able to financially viably find a way to produce e-commerce descriptions at scale. I think having AI product descriptions is better than having manufactured product descriptions on a website.
At SEOClarity, we're doing that. We're pursuing that at scale for our clients, because they need it for product descriptions, things like that, where we're not helping them do it at that huge scale is in, more
I think
like
I think it makes a lot of sense for commerce. Maybe for your meta descriptions, that kind of stuff where you're filling in pieces. My understanding of that particular research that I'm referencing is it was more like article content, full page. And I wanted the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because it actually goes back to engagement, which will then follow into reviews, which is, if I had my best guess, I forgot to read and look at all the data in that thing. So maybe it's there, what I'm about to say, or maybe it's not, is that as people read what I can only assume is more nonsensical content about a made up topic, that there was less time spent on that, and that the quicker bounces and the lowered engagement on the AI content versus the human content, just because of the way it was written, how humans respond to reading that content, that if I had to make a wild guess, it would be that guess. To the point of reviews and not making up a person and just generating whatever it might be, I do think that to pull this full circle back to authorship, I do think that Google does consider whether it thinks the person associated with that review is real, and then it comes down to how was it written, and is it written in a way that we have, this week, being Google, have decided is likely the most real review. That's this person actually did use it, that it wasn't just somebody used a bunch of like pronoun, my and the and I, my experience, and I did this and whatever, because that's, if you tried to game it, that's sort of the trick. But what I've found is everything that I've written, which is not much, on a domain that shouldn't rank, for topics that I shouldn't necessarily rank for either, and zero links going to those things, the fact that I wrote them and I'm a known entity, apparently a journalist. I mean, come on. And the fact that the way I wrote them was absolutely, it was as sincere and true and authentic and genuine as it could possibly be about that thing, with examples, with original pictures, original video, and talking about my personal experience with it. Many of those show up either as a featured snippet or somewhere on the first page, and they shouldn't, but they do, because of how that was created. And because there's three factors: because how it's written, the amount of time people spend on the review, which is typically over 2 minutes, and which means they're reading it. They bounce. I have a huge bounce rate, but it's not until after 2 minutes or more. And then because I'm a known entity as an author.
I have a question then. Like, we're going to MozCon in 3 weeks, and we'll probably hear about 8 billion times while we're there, right? But I don't hear a lot of SEOs talking about what we're talking about currently. And I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not as many as talk about EAT, right? Where it feels like the couple of changes we've talked about, you're talking about like an afternoon of dev work to make sure your schema is dialed in, you got a singular URL space, you're connecting those dots. Why do you think people are overlooking the potential value here and so focused on, John, which I agree with you, is, hey, those are quality grader guidelines. Yes, you should be creating content that's in that way, but this doesn't equal necessarily some kind of weird signal they're picking up to help rank stuff.
So I think EAT is an aspiration, right? It's not a ranking factor. We all know that. Like they're very clear about that. It's not directly, it's describing the way that they wish the web looked, basically, right? They wish content on the web looked. And they're when I say it's aspirational, I think the purpose of the quality raters is to say, like, how close is whatever actually is in the algorithms, the mechanical algorithms that are doing the ranking, how close is that coming to what real humans want to see and want to engage with in the ways that John described? So it's not like I'm going to add expertise to my thing. I'm going to add trustworthiness to my content. Those are conceptual things, right? I think the things that John was saying are so important because they're just simple, fundamental things about concentrating on what real humans want. And damn it, as much as we've hated after all these years of hearing Matt Cutts and then Danny Sullivan saying, like, just produce better content, great content. It was like, it's kind of coming true. I mean, John's against, anecdotal evidence, but still there's a lot of it out there. And I've seen it too, that good quality from a good author who knows what they're talking about, that stands out, that has something unique to say, can rank without any other things that we all like to think are traditional ranking signals.
Well, I think it's, again, if you look at SEO, it's always content, links, and technical. And there are, again, these three components. There's your schema and linking to those author profiles. There's the linked aspect of finding places to be published, and finding venues where you can publish elsewhere, and building a profile and engaging in kind of traditional marketing, and then the content itself. So all three need to be there to be truly successful. And the people that are just looking for the quick, easy win on, oh, feed it into AI and get a bunch of content, they got a big 1/3 of it, but the other two pieces are still lacking. And that's kind of like the gold rush mentality of SEO is, oh, what's the shiny new object?
Mhm.
And everybody blogs about it. And we hear
Yeah,
all of
but
these echoes.
Eat's been the shiny thing for a long time. And when AI came around, even as much as I hated it, I was like, all right, at least somebody will talk about something new now. But I feel like AI has been such a train wreck in terms, like, the whole thing is just like, I don't know. Like, a lot of the products and everything been rolled around it, they're so immature and terrible that like everybody was ahead of themselves on it. And it just feels like it's burned out fast, right? I mean, I think we've seen it at CopyPress. We had a really slow first 6 months, and we're seeing people come around now. And I'm very sure that people were testing AI heavily to replace human writers. And everybody we've talked to has been like, yeah, that did not work.
Yeah.
That was not what we
It's why,
thought it was going to be.
I can share personally, when we made the decision, and it was a hard decision to finally, in our content optimization part of our platform, to include generative AI in that, we said, okay, you want it, we're going to bring it in, but we're going to limit the way you can use it for your own good. Like, we do not let anybody through our platform produce an article that's strictly written by so we use the generative AI to bring suggestions to the writer, to bring ideas, to create outlines. You cannot create in our platform an entire article using just the generative AI. So that was an ethical decision that we made, partly ethical, partly like we want our clients to succeed, because when they succeed, we succeed. Just saying, like, we're kind of being the doctor here and saying, for your own good, we're gonna limit how you use this. But we're going to at the same time make it more useful, because we're training it, instead of using ChatGPT, which is just out there rampant, all kinds of the whole web, which is full of all kinds of crap. We're training it on actual SEO data. So your competitive ranking situation, what content's ranking for the keywords you're trying to rank for, all that kind of stuff. We're training it on that. So it's much more useful and practical and more, but more accurate. But I think the main point I want to make is that we've made that decision. Like, we agree with you guys that, this is like, trying to just use that and throw it out there is not going to benefit you.
Yeah, I mean, we built a tool as well that does outlining, research. It can actually go through the whole article creation. So our idea was, could we give writers an early draft, right, that they can then work from? But we actually go through like a research phase first, parse all the HTML. So we're giving the LLM, here's the information I want. Don't come up with crazy stuff on your own, for the love of God, right?
Yes. Right.
But yeah, I mean, to get to a usable product, we're actually testing right now. We have a partner called Proof that does human high quality editing, like at journalism levels. Is okay, what if you took AI in the front and put that stuff on the back end of it? I think, back to John's point, you still miss it, because what's the human connection, and what's like going to keep that person on the page reading it, right? Like, those human elements, like, everybody automatically assumed we're all just completely replaceable, and there's no inherent value to human experience. You know what I mean? Which is why we started reading and writing as a species in the beginning, was to have that connection with people. Now we're like, oh yeah, we're not important in this process, give it to the robots.
We did it to remember our history, but that's a whole other topic. Like a whole book called Sapiens, I think, where they go over that.
Yes.
It's so good.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
I think what I want to go back to something that Dave said about how language learning models and sites that are pushing out that type of mass content is ultimately a self-defeating cycle, as we see Google, Bing Chat, and others trying to tap into web data to get answers for these questions. So it seems to me that there is an aspect not yet touched on authorship, of the concepts of when other people are just trying to mass spam and mass produce content, of getting your unique voice out to more places is kind of a strategy to show up as the cited source in these language learning supported models. Show up on Bard because you're not just on your own site, but you're also on Muckraker, or you're on this other site, or you got published in here, which takes genuine time and effort to find publishers willing to take your content, genuine time to produce quality enough content to get pushed out there. So I think that's the final frontier is authorship, you know, just a conversation about making sure that within your company you're not just producing content, but you have a contract with a specific expert who is producing content on your site, but also trying to negotiate and get placements for that expert to publish elsewhere in the industry. Worked for a PCB software company, and the highest paid person on the company, aside from the CEO, was actually just the writer, because he had multiple degrees. He was an extremely well-known influencer, and what he said was exactly current in what was happening in PCB software. And they had to peg him down to a contract to, get him to write content for them, and his name to stay on that content forever. Because I think that's a stumbling block that some companies experience, that certain SEOs struggle with as they try to get content built, is how do we find these subject matter experts, get them on our team, and retain them, or retain the right to their name. Oh, they left the company and now all of these blog posts are now author, or they're written by CopyPress or written by your company name. So I think there's a practical side to that. Do you guys want to talk about that?
I think like you made just quickly, I think you made a very important point there back a few minutes ago, and that this is, or at least that's how I heard it, is that this is an opportunity. It's like there's more incentive now than ever before to bite the bullet and make that investment in good quality authors who know what they're talking about, who have a reputation online, all of those things, because there's going to be this like mass extinction event. I think there's been a lot of articles written recently about the concern that the AI, that ChatGPT type generative AI, is going to cannibalize itself, because as people start churning out massive amounts of this garbage, content from the AI, that becomes the training base of the AI. The AI is training itself on the same crap that it produced, and that it's just going to get worse.
And
they call it model collapse.
Other side of that too is you can now say, hey, I don't want you crawling my site, right? Like Reddit started limiting ChatGPT, or like OpenAI. So now the signal's getting even worse, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because again, they launched these products, in my opinion, too early, before they figured out the symbiotic model that Google knew from the beginning. In order to get webmasters to play ball, we got to bring them value.
Yeah.
And like, there's, unless you go in and tell, when like you create an article, let's say ChatGPT put it in now, unless you tell them to give you the sources, they're not giving you the sources. So there's like very little upside to a publisher allowing any of the LLMs to go through their site and take their content.
Yeah.
I think that the opposite of what people think is going to happen, which is, I think AI is going to lose in this battle. And I'm going to tell you why. I think that, to mark kind of where you were going down, that the people who are going to benefit are going to be the copywriters out there that actually specialize in certain areas. I'm already seeing this in general. Before the 6-7 months ago, Chat GPT came out, which is there. I see certain writers, just because of the space I'm in, that are writing they're across the board for different companies. I don't want to name any names, but for different companies, they're whatever. And then I see their stuff actually start to perform better the more they write about that topic on these different sites. This all, of course, makes sense. This is kind of like SEO 101 in a way. But if we go back to what we're talking about, where Dave, like where you've tried to scale this in certain ways, or, how could I create just to try it out? Like, how could I create fake authors and produce 20,000 whatever it might be. The issue with it is that it's all watered down, not scalable. It's, we mentioned model collapse, but it's just, if you're just sticking all this stuff out there, well, that flies in the face of the idea that, if we believe that quality is better than quantity, why would quantity work? And to me, that's a quantity play. And I don't, and I think modern SEO knows that. I mean, it can. There's always an exception.
Yeah,
Somebody's going to listen to this and be like, John, you're an idiot because I'm doing it now and I'm making $1 million bucks. But for the most part, the quantity play doesn't work. The idea that the suggestion that every company just needs to blog, we know that's dumb. We know that doesn't work, and they get all upset and they're like, SEO doesn't work. We were told to just spit out content on our blog and it didn't work. You have to have a strategy. You have to think about who's writing that. You have to think about why you're writing. You have to even think about what the hell they're doing when they get to the page, and what you're gonna and what they're supposed to do is they get halfway through. Should they take an action? How does this help your company? And I just think that those realities will end up beating out this idea that AI is going to run amok and ruin Google forever.
Well, so I mean, again, the tools already exist for the saturation issue, right? That was a part of the Panda. Panda wasn't just, is this low quality content? There was a portion of it is like, you have 100,000 pages on your site and you have 50 links going to like your first level. Like you have all of these pages that have zero engagement and you have zero links and signals. This isn't normal. How would this happen? So like, I think anybody who's using it at that scale just to churn stuff, either
and you can't scale a fake author. I mean, you can't do that. In other words, like, let's say that your system creates 100 authors and they're going to have 100 or more articles they produce. Well, how does that actually get out? They know that a human being can't write 100 articles 100%. In 3 days.
Yeah. I mean, then again, there's a scalability issue of just like, well, what needs to be created to make those 100 authors real in the sense that we've talked about. Individual pages, now you have content syndication stuff you have to do with linking back to start tying all these pieces together. I think a lot of the tools do exist. It's why when everybody was freaking out about Google being behind Bing on the AI stuff, I'm like, one, they've been working with the LLM and AI stuff for years, just not as a consumer product. Two, from my perspective, the ChatGPT and Bing was the dumbest feature ever. I was like, I don't understand this, because it's like, it's featured snippets, but it writes it in real time. Like,
the only thing that Google was behind on was a PR.
Yeah, it's exactly it. It was just
look
a
what
PR
that's gotten
play.
Bing, because Bing's whatever boost Bing got, the little bit of boost it got from bringing out the AI first, has all gone away.
Right. It dissipated because the product's terrible. And again, I think Google's smart enough to know, like, Bing doesn't have to worry about how much money they make. It's always been a loser. Microsoft doesn't care. And so they can roll out all kinds of garbage and trash and it doesn't matter. Google has to worry about their quarterly earnings and whether that new SERP that has not been tested on like actual revenue generation at scale is going to produce or not.
I want to talk about Bard because you brought it up earlier and I want to go back to it. But the first thing I want to say before that is, as much as I personally am not embracing generative AI to help me do things, I still like it for certain things. And I like it in the ways that the two of you said that you're using it, which is, I absolutely think it has value as an assistant. I absolutely think it has value in maybe producing a quick outline around a thing to then have you go and develop your content. So like, I'm not anti that. I don't need it or want it for myself, but I can see how many people out there in the industry would need this and use this. With that being said, I would love to just spend some time shitting on Bard and some other stuff, because I think it is a stinker. I mean, like, when I use it, it's slow. It pisses me off because like the whole point of Google is instantaneous results. I'm one of those people who actually likes featured snippets. It is a piece of content that almost
I
always
love 'em.
matches what I'm querying, and it's from a human being, and it's right
Yep.
there.
It's a great
With
search
Bard,
experience, quite
Yeah,
honestly.
it absolutely is. Yeah.
yeah, with Bard, it's like we're gonna fix something that's not broken, and we're gonna make it so when you type in your thing, we're gonna give you the answer. But then after a couple of seconds, we're gonna push the right answer down, and we're gonna give you this thing,
You're talking about
And-
SGE, right?
and it's gonna be potentially gibberish, which half of them seem to be. I mean, just total like, what am I looking at? And then on top of that, if we're going to show the 3 links or whatever, the things up there, we're going to pick ones randomly that were way down the page.
Yeah.
And you're going to really love it when you do a brand search, because we're definitely not going to pick the brand.
Yeah.
We're going to pick
So
something else.
you're
So
talking about
anyways,
the search.
that's
You're
my
talking
trick.
about search generative experience, right?
Yes, SGE.
Yeah. Like I use it, tried it every day, test it like that. Like I'm at the point now, like I'm just, every time I see it, I'm like, get out of my way. Just get out of my way. You're
I
annoying.
hate it.
It's a terrible experience. And it's also like, man, I don't know how the engineers, I guess, are afraid to talk to people at the top, because it's like, AI was never going to be a search killer. Like, I get that you guys were thinking it could have been. It's not its functionality. Back to what you said, John, it's a hammer, not the carpenter. Like, it's a tool that can do really cool stuff. Like, I talked early on with one of our guys who hates generative AI, but he's like, generative AI could really be a game changer from how we use applications on the web kind of experience, right? Like making a much more customized kind of user
Highly
experience.
specialized uses.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's cool. And that's where I
Yeah.
get excited. I'm like, there are some really cool, like we're using it right now to kill tasks that I used to have people wanting to quit because they were doing it. And now it's like, no, cool. We can just use generative AI for this really quick and knock it out. And I
use it every day. Let me give you a quick example, just a quick, beautiful example, like where ChatGPT works brilliantly, almost perfectly. Every day I have to create videos, and I do quizzes on the videos on the training side of the training hat that I wear. Used to take me half an hour to an hour to write a quiz off of a video. Now I take the transcript of the video, I put it in ChatGPT, I say, write me a multiple choice quiz. Because it's just looking at that content that I wrote. It's not looking at the whole web, right?
Yep.
I have to edit maybe 2 or 3 words out of everyone. It's ready to go. It's brilliant at things like that. Give it a highly specialized case, limit what it looks at, and it does great work.
I think that's because, you talked about the accuracy, humans don't hallucinate like language learning models. People forget. They're like, oh, they're enamored with the term AI for ChatGPT and these other projects, and they forget that the language learning model is literally guessing the next word in the phrase. And so, of course, it's never meant to be truly accurate. That's not what it was
It's meant to give an answer, not the answer, but an answer. Yeah.
It's just give you an answer, and
which we know that's horrible. That's a horrible human trait.
Yes, it's my
right.
dad.
You would not take advice from a person whose brain works.
I'm a know-it-all. I will give you the answer anytime.
People
whatever
have called it
I'm going to give you an answer.
People have called it mechanical mansplaining.
Yeah,
it sounds exactly like a mansplainer on Twitter.
My dad, you ask him a question, he'll give you an answer. It is never guaranteed to be accurate.
But I mean, again, so this goes back to the misinformation thing too. And what my fear, like I have 1,000 fears with AI. None of them are like, they're going to replace us. I mean, if anything, it's proven to me, no, they cannot, like we're a long way from anything like this happening. But yeah, I mean, I think the idea that it doesn't have anything to understand nuance, right? It's why the LLMs inherently skew racist, right? Like, or at least like, I mean, let's just call it that, right? So like they inherently skew to negative perceptions of certain racial stereotypes. Why? That stuff's all over the internet, man. And so like, like what happens when we've seen this deluge of more and more, I don't want to call it fake news. We'll call it like, misinformation. And it's picking that up now, right? Like, and then there's the stuff they're doing to try to control the bias and the effect that has on certain things as well. And so you're getting this information portal now that is like, where did this come from? And going back to what it actually does, and nobody understands it, is literally what's mathematically the next word that should go here based on all of our training that we have. It's not thinking through the topic. It's not like, hey, this is the best way to approach it. It's saying, based on a vector and what the math says, this is what I should write next.
So
What are we doing, man?
wow,
What have we done? What have we done?
the machines are lying to us, John.
So are people. We're all people in the machines. We're all lying to each other.
So I think that's a good place to find a logical conclusion. You know, we've explored from where it began all the way to machines are now lying to us. So everybody can go home depressed at the end of this video.
Machines are lying to us is a good band name, like an emo band from the
Yes.
early 2000s.
I can see it. I can see it. My Chemical Romance, the machines are lying to us. Well, thank you guys for coming on and discussing authorship with us.
Yeah, really super appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely.
Really
Thanks for having us.
I love seeing y'all again. It's been a long time.
I know, this is good.
Even if it's virtually. It's great.
I don't go out of my hole very often. I sit in a cave, this cave specifically that I'm in. I go out like twice a day for meals and then grunt and then come back in.
Grunt, a daily grunt.
Well, I'll just say, Jeremy,
see the boys and I'm like, and then I come back.
Yeah. Right. Jeremy said earlier that humans don't.
Sorry, Mark.
Jeremy said earlier that humans don't hallucinate, you know, when they're creating content, the way that the machine learning does or the LLMs do. I'm going out to celebrate my birthday tonight, so I might prove that wrong later this evening if I sit down and write anything.
Good.
We'll see.
Okay. Right. Yeah, the alcohol could be involved.
I wasn't, you know, saying about any specific thing. I just, yeah.
All right. Thanks, y'all, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Hit that